Learning to listen. Discerning God's voice in a noisy world. Introduction. Some people are not confused because they don't love God. They are confused because they are trying to discern in a world that never stops speaking. So much reaches for you before you are ready. Opinions, alerts, inner commentary. The subtle pressure to decide quickly, to keep up, to be certain. In that kind of atmosphere, even sincere faith can start to feel like guesswork. This book is not about chasing signs or becoming mystical or turning your life into a decoding exercise. It is about learning a steadier way to be led, through stillness, scripture, wisdom, and a listening heart formed over time. You don't have to strain to hear God. You can learn to make room. Chapter 1. Why listening is hard. Now, most days begin before we do. A screen lights up. A message arrives. A list forms in the mind. Even if the room is quiet, the inside may already be loud, and it's hard to listen when you're already full. Noise is not only what you hear, it is what you carry. Unfinished conversations, worry that keeps rehearsing, responsibilities that expand quietly, the constant sense that something is missing or late or about to go wrong. Over time, the inner life becomes crowded, not sinful, just crowded. And what is crowded has less room to receive. Sometimes we assume the problem is that God is silent, but often the problem is simpler. The soul is overstimulated. Attention is divided. The nervous system is braced. Listening becomes difficult not because God is far, but because the heart has lost its capacity to settle. Not every inability to listen is spiritual failure. Some of it is fatigue. There is also a particular pressure that makes discernment almost impossible. The pressure to get it right. The fear of choosing wrong. The need for certainty before you move. When that pressure lives in you, you begin scanning for guidance the way a person scans for danger. Quickly, constantly, with a tight chest. In that state, everything can begin to feel like a message. A phrase someone says, a coincidence, a sudden idea, a feeling that rises like a wave. You might tell yourself, God must be speaking, when what you're actually hearing is anxiety looking for relief. Anxiety is loud. It gives urgent instructions. Discernment is quieter. It takes time. Another reason listening is hard now is that we expect God to guide us the way the world guides us, through constant prompts, constant updates, constant urgency. We've been trained to believe that if something matters, it will interrupt us. But God is not an alarm. He is a shepherd. The shepherd does not shout you into safety. He leads. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10. That sentence is not an accusation. It is a release. It invites you out of franticness and back into proportion. Stillness is not the absence of life. It is the return of reality, the moment the urgent stops pretending it is ultimate. Listening begins there. Not with strain, but with room. You may also be carrying something more tender. A fear of missing God, a fear of being left to yourself, a fear that if you don't hear clearly, you will lose your way. Many faithful people have lived with that fear without naming it. But God is not playing hide and seek with your life. He is not asking you to become a perfect receiver. He is forming you into steadiness. And steadiness is built slowly, through repeated return, through patient attention, through a life that becomes less crowded. If listening feels difficult right now, you don't have to panic. You can begin with honesty. How much noise have you been carrying? How much urgency has been shaping you? How often has your attention been taken without your consent? This is not shame. It is clarity. And clarity is often the first kindness God gives. Chapter 2. God's voice is not rushed. Intensity can feel convincing. A thought arrives with force. A feeling surges. A sense of urgency presses you, and because it's strong, you assume it must be true. Many people have made major decisions under that kind of pressure, later realizing they were not being led, they were being driven. Driven feels tight, led feels steady. The voice of rush has certain signatures. It speaks an ultimatum. It demands immediate action. It makes you feel that if you pause, you will lose something essential. It feeds on fear. Fear of missing out, fear of disappointing someone, fear of not being safe. God does not need fear to motivate you. This matters because the modern world runs on urgency. It rewards fast responses, quick takes, immediate certainty. Even when you want to walk with God, you may still be carrying that pace inside. You may be attempting to hear a steady voice while your inner life is vibrating. God's guidance does not compete with panic. It invites you out of panic. Even Jesus, who carried deep purpose, does not move as though God is anxious. He is attentive. He is present. He is never portrayed as frantic. His life contains sorrow, opposition, pressure, but not spiritual haste. There is a calm strength in him, as though he knows time is held. You may not be able to change your schedule overnight, but you can begin to notice the difference between urgency and conviction. Conviction may be firm. It can call you to apologize, to confess, to change direction, but it is often clean. It doesn't need drama. It doesn't manipulate you with panic. It may be weighty, but it is not chaotic. The Lord will guide you continually. Isaiah 58:11. That promise carries a certain tone. Continually suggests faithfulness. Not constant instruction, but steady presence. It suggests God is not absent most of the time and then suddenly loud only in crisis. It suggests you are accompanied. Sometimes the guidance of God comes as restraint. Not a new door, but a quiet not yet. Not a dramatic yes, but a gentle settling that says, wait. Not a rush forward, but a slow strengthening. When you are used to urgency, restraint can feel like silence. But silence is not always absence. Sometimes it is God refusing to add to your pressure. Sometimes it is God protecting you from your own drivenness. If you're unsure whether something is from God, you can pause long enough to let the pressure settle. Pressure hates time. Truth can wait. What is from God often remains clear when your body calms. What is from fear often fades or shifts as soon as you stop feeding it. You don't have to treat every strong feeling as a directive. You can let your inner life settle and see what remains. God is not threatened by your carefulness. He is not insulted by your pause. He is patient enough to lead you at a human pace. And learning to listen often begins with this simple change, refusing to make urgency your interpreter. Chapter 3. Stillness as the first teacher. Not speed, not volume. Stillness. Stillness teaches you what has been living in you. When you stop moving, what rises is often what you've been carrying. Thoughts that never finished, emotions that were postponed, fear that stayed busy so it wouldn't be felt. This is one reason stillness can feel uncomfortable. It doesn't create problems, it reveals them. But revelation is not punishment, it is an opening. Stillness is not an advanced practice for the disciplined. It is one of the most basic ways the inner life becomes receptive again. Not because God only speaks in stillness, but because stillness makes room for you to recognize what is already true. Sometimes the first thing you notice is restlessness. The mind reaches for noise as if silence were unsafe. A person can feel guilty for this, but guilt rarely helps. The restlessness is not the enemy. It is information. It shows you how conditioned you are to constant input. A few minutes of stillness can feel like an hour if your attention has been trained to scatter. That's okay. In returning and rest you shall be saved. In quietness and in trust shall be your strength. Isaiah 30:15. Quietness and trust belong together. Stillness is not empty time. It is trust taking physical form. It is the decision to stop bracing and let yourself be held. Stillness can be small. A pause before you speak, a breath before you answer, a moment with your feet on the ground, noticing you are here. You don't need a perfect environment. You don't need a perfect mind. You simply need permission to stop forcing. Stillness also retrains your relationship to thoughts. Many people treat every thought as a messenger. Stillness teaches you that thoughts can rise without being obeyed. A worry can appear without becoming a plan. A memory can surface without becoming a spiral. A feeling can be present without becoming a command. This is part of listening, because if everything inside you is treated as guidance, you will be led by the loudest part of you. Stillness helps you distinguish what is passing from what is true. It gives you space to notice. This is fear. This is sadness. This is fatigue. And then without fighting, you can return to God. A listening life begins with learning to sit without demanding immediate clarity, to be with God without extracting answers, to be present without turning prayer into pressure. Stillness teaches you that you can remain with God even when you don't know what to do next, and that capacity, remaining, is one of the roots of discernment. Chapter 4. Scripture as the primary voice. Some guidance feels personal, and that can be meaningful. A thought that arrives gently, a sense of direction, a quiet correction. But the foundation of discernment is not private impressions. The foundation is Scripture, because Scripture is where God's voice is most stable, most consistent, most clear in character. Scripture does not give you a personalized script for every decision. It gives you something deeper, the shape of God's heart. And if you know the shape of God's heart, you become less easily misled by voices that sound spiritual but are not wise. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. John 10:27. Hearing God is not first about decoding hidden messages. It is about knowing the shepherd. And you learn the shepherd's voice by living with his words and ways long enough for them to form you. This formation is quiet. It happens without spectacle. It is like learning the tone of someone you love. Over time, you recognize what fits, and you recognize what doesn't. Scripture teaches you what God is like. He is truthful, He is patient, He is holy without cruelty, He is merciful without manipulation. So when you feel compelled by something, an impulse, a pressure, a must, you can ask, does this sound like Him? Is it consistent with His character? Does it lead toward love? Does it produce steadiness rather than chaos? Does it deepen humility rather than pride? Scripture becomes a filter, not a weapon. A few verses, returned to faithfully, can shape your inner life more than constant novelty. Discernment rarely grows from spiritual consumption. It grows from living with truth until it becomes your inner language. This is why you don't have to read huge amounts to be formed. You can return often to a small portion, letting it settle into you. The goal isn't speed. The goal is familiarity. Scripture also protects you from spiritual pressure. If an insight leads you into harshness, self-saving, manipulation, or panic, it deserves suspicion. God may correct you, but He doesn't deform you. His voice leads toward truth with love. It doesn't require you to become less human. A listening life is a Scripture-formed life. Not rigid, not noisy, steady, and steadiness is one of the safest places to discern from. Chapter 5. Conscience and Wisdom. Not everything God gives you comes as a message. Sometimes it comes as maturity. Many people expect guidance to arrive as constant instruction, as if God will tell you precisely what to do in every moment. But God often guides through wisdom formed in you over time. Wisdom is what remains when truth has been lived long enough to become discernment. It is not merely knowing what is right, it is knowing what is fitting. Conscience is part of this, not a perfect instrument, but a meaningful one. A formed conscience becomes an inner witness. It doesn't replace Scripture, it is shaped by Scripture. And it helps you walk in integrity when decisions are not obvious. Sometimes guidance is not a dramatic direction, it is a quiet sense. This is not clean. This is not wise. This will not lead toward love. It can be gentle, almost easy to ignore, but it matters. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, and it will be given. James 1:5. Wisdom is presented as a gift, not a prize for the impressive, not a secret for the elite, a gift, and gifts are received, not forced. If you are uncertain, you can ask for wisdom without panic. You can ask without demanding immediate certainty. You can ask and then wait. Wisdom often grows through time, prayer, and honest reflection. It also grows through counsel, through the voices of faithful people who are not invested in your urgency. Sometimes God guides you through the calm clarity of another person's perspective. Wisdom teaches you that not everything is equally urgent. A wise person pauses before reacting. A wise person considers consequences without fear. A wise person chooses what is faithful over what is impressive. This kind of wisdom is part of listening, because you're no longer seeking guidance as a way to relieve anxiety. You're becoming the kind of person who can walk with God steadily through real decisions. Sometimes the clearest guidance is not exotic. It is ordinary faithfulness. Speak truthfully. Love the person in front of you. Keep your word. Rest when you need to rest. Confess quickly. Do the next right thing. This may not feel like a word from God, but it is often exactly the path God uses to shape a life. And as you walk that path, discernment deepens, not as a sudden power, but as a steady inner clarity. God is not always trying to give you something new. Often He is forming you into someone who can live well. Chapter 6. Urgency and Conviction. Urgency wants speed. Conviction wants truth. They can feel similar at first, especially if you've lived under pressure for a long time. But they leave different traces in the soul. Urgency tightens you. Conviction clarifies you. Urgency pushes you toward immediate action to relieve discomfort. Conviction may call you to act, but it doesn't need panic as fuel. Conviction is often clean. It may be weighty, but it doesn't feel manipulative. Many people have spiritualized urgency. They assume the strongest push must be God. But intensity is not always sacred. Sometimes it is simply fear wearing religious clothing, fear of disappointing someone, fear of missing an opportunity, fear of being wrong, fear of losing control. Fear can create guidance that feels compelling, even righteous. But fear does not make you discerning, it makes you reactive. The peace of God will guard your hearts and your minds. Philippians 4:7. Peace guards. Peace doesn't bully you into motion. Peace gives you space to act wisely. This doesn't mean every hard decision will feel peaceful, but it does mean God's guidance does not require chaos as proof. When something is from God, even if it costs you, it often carries steadiness. A clarity that remains when you are calm. A direction that doesn't depend on adrenaline. One gentle test is to ask, what is this producing in me? Is it producing love, patient, honest, humble? Or is it producing drivenness, tight, sharp, frantic? God's voice forms you into Christ. It doesn't form you into frantic self-saving. If you feel compelled to decide quickly, you can pause, not to avoid obedience, but to practice discernment. You can let your body settle. You can pray without performing. You can wait long enough to see what remains. Pressure hates time. Truth can wait. Sometimes conviction will remain clear even after the urgency fades. Sometimes the urgency will dissolve, and you'll realize it wasn't guidance. It was anxiety trying to protect you. God is not offended by your carefulness. He is not asking you to move faster than your peace. He is forming you into steadiness, where you can hear clearly without being driven. Chapter 7. Listening over time. Discernment is not a switch you flip. It grows the way a person grows. Slowly, through repeated choices, repeated mistakes, repeated returns. Many people want a quick answer because uncertainty feels vulnerable. But God often gives something better than instant certainty. He gives steadiness. Steadiness can carry you through seasons where answers are not immediate. It can hold you when the path is unclear. It can keep you near God while you wait. Teach me your way, O Lord, that I may walk in your truth. Psalm 86:11. Walking implies time. It implies ordinary pace. It implies that guidance is lived, not merely received. Listening over time means you stop treating discernment like a single dramatic moment. It becomes a posture, a way of moving through the day, a way of carrying decisions. You begin to recognize patterns. You notice what happens when you rush. You notice what happens when you wait. You notice which voices leave you scattered and which leave you clearer. You notice how peace grows when you return to God simply. Over time, the loudest voices become less persuasive, not because you became harder, but because you became clearer. You may still feel fear, but you don't obey it as quickly. You may still feel urgency, but you don't confuse it with God. You may still feel uncertain, but you don't collapse under it. This is maturity. God is not trying to make you dependent on constant messages. He is forming you into a person who can live faithfully. And that kind of person is not formed in a day. It is formed through ordinary days, days where you listen and still don't know. Days where you wait and nothing changes. Days where you choose the faithful thing without applause. In those days, something quiet is happening. Your inner life is being shaped. Your conscience is being strengthened. Your attention is being retrained. Your trust is being deepened. Listening over time means you stop chasing certainty and start cultivating steadiness. And steadiness is one of the clearest places God leads from. Chapter 8. A life guided, not driven. A driven life feels like being chased. You wake up behind. You move through the day with a tight chest. You make decisions quickly because you're afraid to slow down. And even when you accomplish things, you remain unsettled. Many faithful people live this way without realizing it. They confuse drivenness with devotion. They assume pressure must mean purpose, but God does not guide by driving. He guides by leading. The Lord is my shepherd. Psalm 23:1. A shepherd does not chase sheep into safety. He leads them. He stays near. His presence itself becomes direction. This image restores the tone of guidance. God is not harsh. He is not frantic. He is not trying to turn you into a machine. He is forming you into a person who can walk with him. A guided life is not a life without decisions. It is a life where decisions are carried differently. You pause more. You pray without performing. You seek wisdom without panic. You let Scripture anchor you. You refuse to treat urgency as holy. You still act. You still take responsibility. But you do not live as though everything depends on your speed. Being guided means you learn to move at the pace of trust. Sometimes that pace is quick, because love requires it, but it is not frantic. Even quick obedience can be steady. Even hard choices can be made without inner violence. A guided life becomes less reactive over time, less dependent on signs, less controlled by fear, more shaped by peace. And peace here is not passivity. It is the calm strength of a soul that knows it is accompanied. If there is one gentle invitation at the end of this book, it is simple. When you feel rushed inside, pause. Not to solve everything, but to return. Return to stillness. Return to Scripture. Return to wisdom. Return to the shepherd who is near. And over time, your life will become less driven and more guided. Not perfect, but steady. Conclusion. Learning to listen is not a technique you master. It is a life you grow into. Noise will still exist. Decisions will still come. Uncertainty will still visit. But your inner life can become steadier, less reactive, more formed, more able to recognize what is true. God's voice is not rushed. Stillness makes room. Scripture provides a stable center. Wisdom grows quietly. Peace guards the heart, and the shepherd leads with patience. When you forget, return gently. When you feel pressured, slow down long enough to become clear. When you don't know, stay near. Listening is learned the way faithfulness is learned, over time. And you are not alone in the learning.